Okay, so we are dealing with depression, and I think the first place to begin is let's assume you're depressed, or you're probably not interested in this, and I am depressed, which is a great time to figure out what works and doesn't work with depression. So number one, what works with depression? And we can track this both throughout a lifetime and also today. So, the first thing to realize about depression is that it is not it's not natural, and it's not personal. Now, here's what I mean. You are not depressed because you're in a reality that is exciting, intelligent, creative, sincere, honest, kind, loving, abundant, beautiful, and alive, filled with sensuous and gorgeous people adoring and admiring you. No. You're depressed because you're surrounded by busy, dishonest, shallow, scared people that don't want to hear the truth, that are, in most cases, by the way, Jen, I'm ready for my massage. So you're depressed because you are surrounded by a variety of depressing things, number one. Number two, there is a high probability that you are more sensitive, meaning that the crap that goes on in the world around you, or the crap that you do and participate, bothers you as a sensitive person more than the average person. You're depressed if you're a woman because, in part, you're born into a reality in which, just by being a woman, regardless of where you find yourself, I don't think there's a single culture on earth that, in all areas across the board, sees you as the leader, the equal, of equal value. So just by finding yourself in this particular body with this particular mix of, testosterone, you are devalued, which is a miserable, depressing thought, since we all want to be valued highly. And whether or not you are a woman, your feelings are devalued. This is just absurdity. Your feelings count less than your thoughts and your accomplishments. So you are equal parts body, heart, and mind. And it's fair to say, and this is more so and in evidence if you are depressed as we're saying this, that your thoughts and feelings are bothering you more than your body. You are depressed. In other words, if right now you could choose to be an amputee with your hand just stopping here, and of course the operation was a while ago, so there's no pain, you've got a little stub, and you could choose to be exultantly happy and brilliant and cheerful and all that, and not have a hand, or you could have a hand and be absolutely miserable and perhaps want to die. An intelligent person would say, let's swap for the hand, because life is not worth living when it is miserable, and it is miserable when one is depressed. And yet, people think absolutely nothing of feelings. So I think there's a couple of important things to point out before I circle back to why I have begun this video in the way that I have, with the dressing and glorious belly filled with numerous buffalo mozzarella pizzas over the last month. And so let's look at that. So number one, your depression is not your own. And what I mean by that is statistics is in the arena of groups. Meaning if you want to catch the flu from someone and you are in a healthy planet and no one has the flu, you're out of luck. You are doomed to be healthy. However, if you don't want to catch the flu and 80% of the people in your sphere of contact have the flu, there is a 80% probability that you will get the flu. And there is no difference between physical viruses, emotional viruses, and mental viruses. Some batch of idiots a few thousand years ago say, Jesus died for your sins and you better do this and that, or otherwise we're going to kill you. And today, that thought is still virally spreading and being maintained in the most Hippocratic way, Hippocratic way imaginable. So mental ideas and beliefs spread virally. A child just doesn't wake up, in America in 2017 and say, I had a vision. I think someone died for all my sins 2,000 years ago, and I'm going to do this, and I'm not going to do this, and blah, blah, blah. No. They're viruses. Your parents will shout at you, X number of times. They will lecture you. They will read this. They will say, this is the way it is. And you'll say, that sounds like a crock of shit. But everyone around you will say, no, it is. And so, in this culture where you're not burned at the stake for fighting Christianity, you will be given the virus, and your immune system may reject it or you may accept it. Thoughts are viral. Feelings are viral. Statistics show that the proximity to an emotion on a statistical level directly correlates with your probability of sharing the emotion. That's and then physical stuff. So a flu spreads, a feeling spreads, a thought spreads. The better the virus is, the more complex the virus is, the more effective and pernicious the virus, and the weaker and more vulnerable you are when the virus contacts you, the more you will get it. If you're a baby and your mother starts weeping as you're nursing, you're probably going to instantly start weeping too and feel her emotions. If you're a 17-year-old angry and rebellious young child and your mother starts weeping, you may say, "Serves you right, you idiot, what do you think you da 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 da," and we may resist the grief virus with a strong emotion of our own. Maybe we'll even turn our mother from grief and wailing into outraged indignation, which could actually be an improvement, because when she's outraged and indignant, maybe she'll start taking action rather than just weeping. But my point is, this is not your virus. This is a virus that you have contracted from an unhealthy environment. In fact, this is an environment that is so unhealthy that at any given moment, there is roughly 25% of the population in varying degrees of depression. Now, a gardener knows that you don't shout at, criticize, blame, or attack the plant. If the plant is sick, you move the plant to a healthier location. If it's dying of cold, you move it into a tropical location. If it's dying of heat, you move it into the shade or you give it some water. But you've got to have some trust in the core nature of life, of human life, of plant life, of animal life. And what that trust basically says is that this human being, this animal, this plant wants to live, number one. Number two, it is not well. It is not in a state of grace, happiness, ease, flow, and excellence, but it wants to be. A plant, a human being, an animal has to be pretty sick, which means contracting a lot of diseases from a lot of unhealthy external sources before it wants to die, wants to do nothing, wants to shut down. And those influences are not originating on the inside. Now, this gets tricky because most of us contract fatal doses of social viruses at a young age. And then the reason this is so pernicious is that the need for certainty and the need for clear boundaries that every human being has to protect itself from unending chaos, particularly when the external environment is perceived as a threat, demands that we have a self-image. So the cruelest thing that a culture and a set of parents can possibly do to a child is ensure that during the initial ages when a child is forming its sense of identity, is abusing and infecting that infant with so many mental, emotional, and physical viruses that their sense of self is actually misidentified as the sense of coping mechanisms and the virus itself. This is how the virus succeeds in finding a permanent host. But don't for a moment think that you or I came in this way. This is bullshit, dumped, and the cleverest parents in this abuse cycle always succeed in shaming and blaming the child for the disease that they infected them on. So, for example, with with my parents and the amount of shock and PTSD, ranging from, physical abuse, psychological abandonment, emotional unavailability, dogs running and chasing me when I'm 2 years old in tall grasses and smothering me, being in complete social isolation, being read traumatic books like the Old Testament so that you think that, the whole universe is as barbaric as your parents, create an intense level of terror, panic, rage, fear, helplessness, and hate. Then, when you behave strangely under the influence of all these emotional viruses, your parents look at you and say, "You're strange, what's wrong with you?" And because you don't have the intelligence and it's not safe for a child to question their parents, they, of course, say, "Oh, I guess I'm a bad person." Yes, you are a bad person. Look at all we've done for you. We gave birth to you. We've given you your cornflakes today, blah, 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 blah. And so, number one, the parents transfer all of the stupidity, all of the neglect, all of the ignorance that is just part of being an untrained parent in a Western dissociated culture, and they transfer it all to you. Then they blame you for it, and then you cling to that identity because you need something to cling to because they're so unstable and volatile. You have nowhere else to go. I mean, it's like, what do you got? You got isolation, a dog that trumps you over. And so the cleverest parents, looking Machiavellian, through Machiavellian lenses within the understanding of viral sustainability, like how does an evil virus, something that's not actually creating well-being, actually take a hold and perpetuate itself from one generation to the next? And it's quite an accomplishment for any virus. So how does it do it? Well, that's how it is done. It's pretty hard for a child whose whole conscious state has been in trauma and identity around this. Now, that's just my story, and I'm not in any way at the edge of this kind of abuse. I've seen way, way worse. Now, you also need to hide. A virus needs to hide. And so how do you hide the virus? Well, you hide it. First of all, you've got to block out half of reality, like all the terror, pain, and all that. Let's just shut down the emotions in America so that nobody feels it, so that you can look at a terrified child and not feel any of that terror empathically, or have any idea what they're going through or why. So you've got to shut down half of the reality, and then you overemphasize the other. You say, well, you've got better food than the people in China. You've got all this, that, and the other. And basically you shift the focus to the areas that things are healthy. And you use that data to deny that anything is unhealthy. So now you have not, so first you have infected the child. Then you have blamed and shamed them for being infected and for coping mechanisms for dealing with the pain. Then the child grabs onto the diseased concept of self as the self-image, and then it's hidden. Meaning you're not a terrified, miserable, traumatized, abused, and abandoned child who's stuck in a culture where, men having emotions are weak and miserable and women having emotions are less than. You're in the luckiest country on earth. You're rich, you're this, you're that. Look at your shoes, look at your clothes. And you look at that and it's like, that's all true. But this is the illusionist. This is what every illusionist does. They direct your attention to here, and while your eye is on that, they quickly pull the trick. And you have no idea, because the way our conscious mind is when our attention is diverted in this area, we cannot see the other area. So this is the setup. And the important part of this setup is, well, the important part of seeing this setup is that depression is also a virus. It is a virus that is sustained by the illusion. It is a virus that is sustained by the illusion that it's us. So this would be the equivalent of a gardener taking a beautiful young rose seedling and putting her in the shade and not giving her adequate water and not amending the soil. And then as that rose wilts and withers, telling the rose, other plants are growing fine, what's wrong with you? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You've got to, if you're a parent or a teacher in any kind of authority, your job is to take the wilting plant and find the soil, the light and conditions in which things thrive. And this means getting to know the individual. So number one, 20% of the population, if you look at the research of Elaine Aron in her book, The Highly Sensitive Person, 20% of people, and just your own observation, experience things at a higher amplitude. So, for example, if you have very sensitive ears, if you go into a high decibel rock concert, you will be in pain. If you have deaf ears, you'll be like, oh, it's about time something pleasant is happening. Now, this is basic psychology in a culture that is so numb and so materialistic that even something that basic, there are children born today, and despite millions of years of research that show that in mammals of all kinds, there is a distinct, highly sensitive minority that respond differently to stimulation because they hear things louder, they feel things stronger, they emote, they pick up other people's feelings. And in that situation where someone may pick up 300% more, it's the difference between having your hand crushed in a handshake and a pleasant feel. It's the difference between a massage and being beaten. And this is, Einstein and his theory of relativity. It's all relative. Relative to what? To the individual. It's not one size fits all. You don't put a 600-pound weight on a small 80-year-old woman and then shout at her because she can't lift it like a bodybuilder. And you don't talk to a bodybuilder like you would an 80-year-old frail woman. You look to the individual. And when you load a child or anyone with more stimulation, with more pressure than they have the muscle and capacity to deal with, it creates pain, it is abuse, and in that pain you decrease their ability to function. Just take your thumb, you the smart ass who's not paying attention to this, take your thumb, whack it on the nail with a hammer, and then try and solve a math problem. Of course you can't. You're in pain. Now this is very, very basic, but simply by not educating, we have an entire population that doesn't know even that 20% of the population is significantly more sensitive than the other 80%, which means that a nice thumb massage for you is a whack on the hammer for them, which means that the thumb massage that helps you do math is the whack on the hammer that freezes up their ability to think about anything but, oh my God, I'm in danger because I'm in a world that is so ignorant that it is not only causing me pain, but it doesn't even realize it, and it's blaming me. That's a whack on the finger with a hammer that feels like hell, that shocks me, only to be told that it doesn't shock me, that it's for my own good, and that I ought to be able to cope as if I hadn't been whacked on the thumbnail with a hammer. And you see, the obvious thing is it's relative. Relative to what? To what you feel. If you've got sunburn, a slap on the back feels like hell. If you don't, it maybe feels friendly and warm. This has got to be gradient defined with each individual, with the assumption of sensory differences. Because this is not a disability, it's a difference, which means that someone with those very sensitive ears might play the piano beautifully and might faint at a rock concert. The intelligent gardener, again, puts the fragile, succulent plants in just the right mix of shade and stuff where their elegant beauty adds to the mix, and puts the hardier trees that just grow normally and this and that out on the periphery in the harder weather. And there's a dynamic artistic ecology that gets formed. So the point is, if you are depressed, everyone around you as a culture, as friends, as family, as individuals has failed. You have failed, they have failed. You have lost, they have lost. It is a symptom of ignorance and or malice, which is also a symptom of ignorance and malice. So first, just take off the weight. And the fact that we are in a culture. So keep in mind, I'm coming into this talk feeling depressed 8 out of 10. I've been doing coping mechanisms all day. You're coming in this talk, whatever it is. Keep in mind that 85% of the culture that we are in is criticizing, attacking, discounting, humiliating, shaming what I'm saying. What I'm saying, how I'm saying it. So this is, of course, depressing, because if the stuff that shoves the virus back onto the sick and unhealthy culture that perpetrates it is itself attacked by a vast majority, you have every reason to be depressed. Now, it is shoved back with judgment. judgment about the tone, judgment that's not grateful, judgment that's exaggeration, judgment what an asshole, judgment about that's not scientific. Where did he get that? This, no, that's not he's not looking at this. So there's endless mental refuting. This is how a culture protects itself from taking any responsibility for its impact. The impact of a culture is blatantly obvious. You use the scientific method, you see how many people are depressed within a given culture. You cross-reference that to the fact that there have been cultures, that many of our tribal ancestors, we can go to certain situations like the Thoe tribe in Brazil. 0 violence, 0 judgment, 0 depression, 0, it's a healthy, deeply, closely bonded community structure that cares deeply for its young and its old. No depression. You can take a tribal member of the Thoe tribe and introduce them into American culture. They will have a very high probability of going through grief, loneliness, and depression, because the level of warmth is 300 to 600% lower in the United States than in their tribal culture. The busyness and the obsession with technology and the ignoring of people is 1,000% higher in America. The dissociation, the hurriedness of the interaction, the format, texts instead of in person, the dishonesty, the lies, the violence, the media is all heading in a negative direction relative to the Thoe's homeworld, which is why they're happy, bonded, nonviolent, close, affectionate, and not depressed, and 25% of Americans at any given point are in varying degrees of depression. So, are you going to shout and criticize and attack the Thoe tribe member who is shocked by the level of barbaric, sociopathic violence, dishonesty, and abuse, the obsession with material technology? Or are you going to say, wait a minute, no individual deserves this environment. We've gotten way off track. It's time to stop blaming the individual and learning from the Danes. In Denmark, extensive interviews. I was really interested when I went to Denmark. I could not find a single person who was afraid, a single person that felt insecure, a single person that was angry or attacking of their government. Extensive interviews. What do you like? Why? The whole structure. They care about each other in Denmark. And the socialist democracy that they've created has generated a quality of safe and secure lifestyle that in every metric that I measure it, from education, health, quality of environment, policy, inclusiveness, family, participation, architecture, parks, everything, 300% higher. Not only that, it's not have-nots and haves. It's 300% higher for everyone. And if you haven't been to Copenhagen and spent time interviewing and spending time in that environment, you are ignorant of what is possible in a modern Western culture. If you haven't spent time in the Thawi tribe in Brazil, you are ignorant of what is possible in a healthy, peaceful, loving, and affectionate tribal culture. The Danes do it consuming roughly the same amount as most other Western countries. The Thawi do it with close to zero carbon footprint and no money. Either way, the reality is that your chance of being depressed is 10 to 30 times lower in rural tribal Amazonia in the Thawi tribe or in Copenhagen in Denmark. Does it make sense to blame the individual or to examine the toxicity and the fundamental toxicity within the culture? It depends what you're after. If you want to protect the status quo, if you want to deny the problem, if you want to ensure that it is worse in the next generation, attack the individuals, call them complainers, call them whiners, point to the people who are healthy. When Louis Pasteur introduced germs and germ theory into the medical profession, noticing that there was a correlation between hand washing and non-sterilized equipment and many, many fatalities, even in successfully conducted operations. He was laughed, scorned, denied, and tens of thousands of people died so that the idiot doctors who preceded him could maintain their delusion that because they couldn't see the germs, because they were ignorant, they didn't exist. It wasn't until the microscope came along, in the arrogance of the left brain that says if I can't see it, it doesn't exist, that doctors owned up and started taking care of their patients. If you were a doctor back then and you wanted to take care of your patients, you'd start washing your hands and sterilizing your equipment and give Louis Pasteur the benefit of the doubt. If you wanted to make your peers look good, save time, not waste your time washing hands and sterilizing equipment, you'd continue to butcher and murder innocent patients and babies to sustain the stupidity of your ignorance. It depends on what your goal is. My goal is to help individuals infected with depression. And the first step of that is taking the blame off of the individual for a chronically sick environment, when science clearly reveals the prominent role of the environment. Now, it gets worse because the people most likely to be depressed, so the environment determines what percentage of its people will be depressed, but then it's an individual set of variables that determines which people of that environment. So let's say we have a 50% sick environment, 50% of its people are depressed. Okay, so what's it going to be? Are you going to be part of that 50% who are depressed or the 50% who aren't? What is the biggest single determiner? Childhood trauma and abuse. Trauma is actually the core thing. The Adverse Childhood Experience Study correlates 10 arenas of childhood trauma with a lifetime statistical predisposition for a number of things, from suicide, but including depression. So when you have a sick environment, now let's look at this purely physically. So let's say we have an ocean that has fecal matter in it. We've got an ignorant bureaucracy that's running the country and that ocean. Why not just dump all our sewage out into the ocean and then let our citizens swim in it and pretend it doesn't matter? Okay, so far so good. Now 50% of people swimming are getting sick. So far so good. Who is going to get sick? Let's say you've just been beaten by an abusive husband and you've got blood on your shoulder. The fact that you were beaten makes it 95% probable that you're going to be part of the 50% that is sick. In other words, having set up a sick cultural domain to begin with, the people predisposed to be in the part of the percentage that are sick are the most abused people, which is a pattern of abusing someone, shaming and punishing them for being abused, and then abusing them again for being abused. That is painful. It is shameful. It is a shameful cultural practice. It is a shameful level of ignorance to maintain. It is an absurd and barbaric level of ignorance. And I'm using that example because we're much more chauvinistic when it comes to emotional wounds. In our stupidity, our profound chauvinistic stupidity, we don't give acknowledgement to the emotional body, anything like we do to the physical body. I see it constantly and chronically. The father who's bragging about his daughter who runs Trader Joe's. It's like, well, how's her marriage? Is she depressed? Well, she's dealing with a few emotional things, but I'm sure she'll get over it. Let's go back to talking about how she's running Trader Joe's in an executive position, i.e., her feelings don't matter, her accomplishments do. Her feelings don't matter, her education does. Her feelings don't matter, how she looks does. It's sick and it's depressing. Why shouldn't you get depressed if your feelings don't matter a slightest little bit? I mean, even your depression doesn't matter. Big deal. Let's just be depressed. Who cares? We all know feelings don't matter, because that's the next hook. You stick that kind of chauvinism, and if you say, I'm depressed, does someone say, oh my God, we got to get you to a depression hospital, and let's all work and collaborate, and let's look at how we are depressing you? Let's look at the injustices that are going on. Let's look at how we are participating. No. See, the irony is, if I bang a hammer on your nail and you scream, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let's get you to the emergency room. It's just a broken thumb. Oh, no. We're taking you to the emergency room because bodies matter. Your body matters. Your thoughts and your feelings don't matter. It's disgusting. It's ignorant. It's pathetic. But if you've gone along with it because over 10,000 interactions have shown you. Like I had this experience with my brother. We all had the same parents, so naturally we're all in varying states and different coping mechanisms. 5 out of 5 suffering varying symptoms and coping mechanisms with mental, emotional, and physical abuse. Nothing surprising there. You take 5 plants, you batter them, you don't give them water, you do this and that and the other, and then you see what happens. I mean, reasonable that all 5 plants would show some symptoms. Oh yeah, we don't want to deal with that though. We don't want to let's bring in the hero. Let's bring in the 1 in 100 who had even more abusive parents than you, but they turned their life around. See, this is what the culture does in this diversion game. It's like, we don't care about the 99. They're probably lazy, da-da-da-da-da. Let's talk about the hero. And let's talk about how you can go and bet. You can go to Vegas and be a millionaire. It's literally like that. Vegas is an environment in which more than 80% of people over time lose money. It might even be 90, 95%, whatever it is. Let's say it's 99%. If you take all the people who have ever been to Vegas, that 99% of them have walked away with less money over time, particularly if they repeat come, than they arrived with. Seems reasonable? And then someone says, hey, Vegas, you are cheating all those people. You're inviting them all here. You're saying how fun it is to win and all that. And you're saying they'll all be winners. But 99% of them walk out with less money than they have. And Vegas says, what do you mean? Look at this guy. He just won $10 million. How'd you do it? Well, I'm just really smart and da-da-da-da-da. You think it was pure luck? Oh, no. I had positive attitude. I was confident. I was this. I was that. I came to Vegas ready to be a winner, and I just won $10 million. Aren't I great? Let's focus on the minority that, despite the 99% statistical odds that an environment where you lose most of the time and you keep playing, you are going to lose. Let's focus, and then let's ennoble like how positive he was, how confident he was. The fact is, he's an idiot. Anyone who goes to Vegas without some very technical special edge that expects to make money over time is an idiot, because the environment is stacked against them. The house always wins. Well, the house is the culture. The house is the legal system. The house is the economy. Now, I'm not faulting the economy. I think it is perfectly within reason for many people, if they're willing to put in the time, strategy, effort, read the right books. Even though 9 out of 10 businesses fail in the United States within 10 years, so 90% odds of failure within 10 years, I think you can. I mean, my business is going strong after 25 years. I'm making great money, more money than I ever have, working less hours than I ever have. Okay? It's an arena where you can win. And you can win in many of these environments. But it is essential, in my opinion, that we not add to the barbarism by blaming and shaming the individuals who are most vulnerable, the sensitives, people who care and feel more in their body and emotionally, the abuse survivors who, after bone has been broken and broken and broken, that bone is more vulnerable to breaking again. Iraqi veterans coming back from duty in Iraq who had childhood abuse are statistically much higher they're much more likely to develop PTSD than people who didn't have trauma in their childhood and who go through the same experiences. Once the bone is broken, it breaks again more easily. Once the plastic has snapped, you can glue it together again with super glue, but it snaps much easier. And you've got to know this, because one of the most toxic, vicious circles within American individualism is the way that the individual is pummeled again and again and again, and then judged and pummeled for being pummeled, and doesn't get that there's anything wrong. That doesn't say, fuck you, you son of a bitches. You put me through this. You entitled my parents to have kids with no fucking training. They were complete idiots. Everyone in the family is dealing with issues with that abuse. And then before we get back on our feet, you start throwing this and this, and then you don't teach the teachers or anything about trauma or PTSD. It's just completely outrageous. It's fucking outrageous. And then you call this a civilized society? That after 2,000 years and going from horse and carts to iPads, but we can't get it together to do as well as an Amazonian tribe when it comes to our own biology and our own feelings? Get it together, you assholes. Every single one of us has emotions, thoughts, and a body. But the iPad doesn't address the emotional body. We are obsessed first with the physical body, then with the mental body. And the emotional body, which is the single most important part of our well-being. See, depression is an emotional come physical experience. Now, it's co-infected with thoughts that I'm not good enough, thoughts that I'm worthless, all of this stuff. That generates the emotions. And so let's just get those out of here. I'm not worthless. I have enormous raw potential. And the intelligence of a culture can be measured by how much garbage it generates compared to how much well-being it generates, to how much assets and how many liabilities. So an idiotic, simplistic culture will say this stuff is good, this stuff is garbage, and we don't want that garbage, so we're going to cart it off and dig a hole and stick it in a hole. A truly advanced culture knows that everything is energy and it's turning from one thing to another, and there is no garbage. Whatever is generated is potent raw material that with the right technology and mindset can be turned into something far more valuable, so there is no garbage. There is no garbage in an advanced and intelligent culture. Now that goes for people and it goes for material. You know you're in an intelligent and advanced culture when every person in it has a role that is valuable. And when every material asset present is constantly in a process of change towards something more valuable, and there is no waste. Waste is a complicated concoction from a simplistic mind that doesn't have the creativity and initiative to do something with that byproduct. And so it says, well, it's waste, let's throw it away. We are generating more waste people and more waste materials than almost any culture in history. Native tribes around the world, indigenous tribes, for example, when you have mental illness, when you have a crisis of soul and spirit, there is an elder that comes to that person that guides them through the process. They become the shaman because they become the one who sees the disease within the culture because they are affected by it. There is an understanding that this is someone who is sensitive to our diseases, to our limitations, who gets sick because we are sick. And if they can master that and come out healthy and they know how to heal themselves, they will know how to heal us of our own sickness and blind spots. And this is how the shaman goes from what would be in the West a product of waste and undesirable into a transformative process to become a figurehead that is often what stands between that culture and that tribe and survival. When we can start to see clearly and push the objects of abuse, shame, ignorance, stupidity, insensitivity, and numbness away, the depression that is layers and layers and layers of pain and anger and hurt and fear, produced by the layers and layers of ignorance, insensitivity, abuse, lies, betrayals. And we push that off. It can move into a healthy direction. One of the reasons I'm leading with anger is anger can dispel depression. And that's good. Because while a sick culture may not want you to challenge it, while a sick partner may much prefer. See, this is the way we lay it on one another. Some sick asshole starts doing thousands of repetitive things that are painful, depressing, and irritating. They say they'll be there on time, but they're always late. They don't apologize for breaking their word, and they pretend it didn't happen, pretending your feelings didn't happen. They take more than they give, and they don't say thank you. They pretend that's not happening. They discount your feelings. They take your soft spots and expose them in public to humiliation. When you feel hurt and cry about it, they tell you, stop being such a sensitive pussy. When you expect them to do what they say they're going to do, they say, wise up. You've got to grow up and realize that everything doesn't go the way you want it to go. But they still don't apologize, own up, or make amends. When you need them, they're not there. And they make excuse after excuse after excuse to not be there. What you need to be at your best, they don't consider. They don't help you to share the limelight. Instead, they structure the situation so it happens in the terrain that they're good at. If you're good at feeling things and they're good at thinking things, they avoid conversations about feelings, and they constantly make you look stupid by talking about elaborate ideas that are uncomfortable for you. And then they dismiss that using the cultural bias that automatically says that everyone who talks about feelings is less important than people who talk about important ideas. So you look like an idiot. And when you have emotions about that, oh God, here you are again, having feelings. When is this ever going to end? And they blame you for the feelings they've caused. And when you feel lonely and walk away because there is no love in this relationship, they choose to look the other way. And when you don't want to have sex with them, they complain about your inadequacy. They compare you to other people who are more lively because their partners are treating them well, and take no responsibility for reducing you in stature, in competency, in well-being. When you point out a fault, they don't acknowledge it. They compliment themselves for the areas there is no fault, as if somehow the fact that I bought you cheese has something to do with the fact that I just insulted you. No, thank you for the cheese. Good job there. And cut the fucking insults out. And you who's so super intelligent, can't you even fucking get that cheese does not have anything to do with being insulted, you fucking stuck-up bastard? Well, you're getting awfully emotional. That doesn't call for that. And shut the fuck up about that. Feelings are healthy. They are natural. If a feeling is there, there is a basis for that feeling. And if you could give a fuck about my feelings, what the fuck are you doing in relationship with me? And don't you dare call that love. That is bullshit. And the reason 25% of Americans are depressed is that it is not normal, okay, or permissible to say that 90% of the time. The cocktail party, the good old boys club, whatever it is. See, and now it's getting worse because the feminists, in their crusade to be equal, are playing the same bullshitty game. You talk with one of these hard-nosed, arrogant bitches that's determined to play tough and be the guy thing. She has no room for a sensitive man. She has no room for her sensitive girlfriends. It's all about the competition. There's not room for her own vulnerability and feelings. It's a tragedy what's happened with feminism. Because rather than competing to bring the beauty of femininity in both men and women into equal status, there's been a competition to prove that women can be just as bitchy as men can be assholes, which is absolutely true, but not the goal. And it is disgusting. It is disgusting that neither men nor women are able to safely, consistently be vulnerable and talk about sensitive feelings and have those feelings be respected and honored as much as any accomplishment. It is disgusting that the team that put out a new iPhone app that made $1 million is heralded as the important thing. And the team that made a new breakthrough in how to listen, or that came together in a deeply honoring way to perhaps honor the death of a parent or an elder or a child within that group, is yeah, but you're not a winner, i.e. your feelings don't count in this world. Now, there's a certain amount of intelligence around prioritizing survival in terms of money and stuff, but it gets absurd when someone already has $70,000 a year or wherever, and they deny their feelings in order to go from 70 to 180,000 to 200,000 to 1 million to 10 million to 1 billion. It makes no sense. Yes, we have to keep the physical body alive so that we have a chance to explore our emotions. But we don't have to. The endless and insane process of more money, more things, more money, more things, at the constant expense of emotion, emotional depth, etc., etc. So that being kind of stage one, understanding that it's our issue, not your issue, understanding that it is primarily an environmental issue, less an individual issue. The question still comes, what to do about it. You're in a sick environment with sick bastards who, for the most part, will be so busy picking apart what I've said that they don't want to do a damn thing for the depressed person. They don't want to understand it. They don't want to learn a new skill. Fuck you. I'll spend my time making you feel worse. And so, first of all, you want to get rid of those people. They are not safe. They are not sane. They're certainly not intelligent. You get rid of those people. And secondly, what can you do in this environment? Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is find people that you can talk. Like, I am now 40% less depressed as a result of saying that. Felt good. It's exactly what was in there. I didn't know what I was going to say until I said it. A lot of surprise material in there. But this is my point. When no one wants to hear this, like, could you point at a single person in your life who you could have said what I just said to them, and they'd say, thanks so much for taking the time to express all that. That is absolutely sick. How can we work together to improve our lives, given that that's the case? See, I don't know a single person other than a therapist, and they're not going to get off their ass and come into life and start creating another reality. They'll just create another appointment, another $300, and say, like my therapist, yeah, you're right. You know, those are some good points there. Why don't you gather together another $300 and come and say it again to me in 2 weeks? Because I don't want to leave my house. I want you to drive to me and you deal with the traffic because that's more efficient than my business. And it's rather interesting to hear these unique perspectives. I could use the $300. How about it? It's like, fuck you, you son of a bitch. how about you get out of your fucking therapist chair, and if you care about it, do something about it. Let's do something together. You're probably pretty depressed listening to all of these patients of yours. Let's, out with it. What's your gripe? Maybe we could make a team, because this actually gets to my first thing. You want to find some people, if they're at all around, who can listen to this. If you can't, screw the fucking therapist and the traffic and all that. Get out your camera. I'm using this phone here to make this video. Get out your camera. Talk to the fucking camera. My attitude, so first of all, break some fucking rules. Number one. Because the whole rules of the whole system are all geared to keep you inward and inward and inward and inward. Break some fucking rules. Immediately, it'll be more interesting. Look at it, analyze it, experiment. The reason that I like doing these recordings is because I know how much you've been lied to. I know how much bullshit is out there because I've watched it for 40 fucking years. I've watched people be lied to, bullshitted, coerced. I've watched the sensitive one in a group start to bring up a topic and have them discounted, and then someone make a witty remark and the intention goes over to the alpha player. It's not in anyone's interest, and it happens. It's sick. So, by doing this video, yes, a bunch of fucked up assholes are going to take little pot shots at this, because there are plenty of little cliques of people that don't want to learn, that don't want to grow, that just want to take little pot shots and do nothing. Just do the little one-up game. Fine, they can do that. But there's going to be other people that wake up and say, wow, I don't like all that language or this, that, or the other. I'm not comfortable being angry. Be comfortable being angry. You can be depressed. You can be angry. But I get a point about that. I feel a little better about myself with this point. Great. That's good. That's excellent. And then there's going to be some people that are abusers, meaning they make other people depressed around them. And maybe they've been uncomfortable about that, but it's expedient. See, and it's part of your job to create some noise with some of this. It's part of your job to create some noise, because if you don't, you are enabling your abuse. Now, I'm not saying it's your fault. Fuck that. But what I am saying is that if you talk to your abuser like this, they're either going to leave your life, hooray, or they're going to stop abusing you. And I think you should give people the benefit of the doubt. If there is any reasonable chance that they may improve, I think you should give people the benefit of the doubt. Complain about this stuff and see what happens. Now, being how much this culture rewards people for lying and discounting emotions and all that, and how deeply ingrained it is, this is going to seem a little radical. In other words, in a radically sick and unbalanced culture, a clear stand for balance seems very radical. And you've got to be radical. Now, what can happen? So relationships can end, hooray. Abuse can stop, hooray. You can vent the anger that's all these suppressed emotions, hooray. you can stop blaming and shaming yourself. Hooray. And you can find some people that are willing to talk candidly and listen candidly. Hooray. And you can start seeing, what you're going to do about some of these different things. Now, I don't think there's a right or wrong. Let's say you've got some guilt-trippy mom who's frail and pathetic and depends on you and this and that and the other, and she's constantly depressing you and saying little guilt-trippy remarks. What I did with my mother was I said, look, you do not want to hear what I have to say. That's not why you're contacting me. What you want to hear is that everything's fine. And that, you want to be appraised or appreciated for this, that, the other. However, because I have PTSD, because I'm stuck in some of these memory loops, because my body is not able to calm down, that's not what you're going to get. There's still a lot that you've never owned, you've never apologized for, you don't want to see, you've never volunteered, you don't understand, you don't want to understand. So let's be clear here. You don't want a relationship with me. You want a relationship with the fantasy son that doesn't have any of these feelings for any of this. That's what you would like. So I don't think this relationship is very good for you, Mom. I mean, you can go off and have fantasy and different things with lots of people. And I think you'll feel better, and that's fine. I'm not interested in punishing you or this, that, or the other. But why don't you go do that? And she'd say, oh, no, I really want to hear. And I'd just start talking, and after like 5 minutes, she'd be like, oh, yeah, that's not true. This isn't that. This, I never did that. It's like, so look, Mom. You say you want to hear all this stuff. And you clearly don't. I haven't even said 5 sentences and you're all upset and worked up about it. I don't want to deal with your upset. That's fine if you want to believe you never did any of this. Perfectly fine. Go off and believe it. But don't pretend that we're not talking because I won't talk. Let's just be candid with one another and say that you do not want to understand, empathize with, or hear what I have to say, namely my experience of things, my feelings. And you don't want to deal with the fact that the reason they're still here is you have never wanted to hear, understand, apologize, or anything for this. Never. You could have done it when I was 5 years old. You could have done it when I was 10. You could have done it when I was 15. You could have done it when I was 20. You could have done it when I was 25. You've just thought you'll wait it all out. And that, and every 5 to 10 years you reach out, you say, oh, let's have this wonderful fantasy. And the same thing is there. You do not want to see what's going on. You never did. You may die not wanting to ever see what's going on, and that's okay if you don't want to. But at least have the courage, at least have the maturity and the humanity to say that we're not relating because you do not want to hear or understand anything. You can't let me open my mouth for a few sentences, and you'd rather have no contact at all than listen unguardedly for an hour. That's about what it would take. You're not an evil person. You're not a horrible person. You're not worse than the typical American. You had tons of abuse yourself. You passed it on. It really hurts. And that's on the top layer of stuff to deal with. And if you don't want to deal with the top layer, I'm not going to go into denial just for your feelings. I will give you the peace that you can escape, but not in relationship to me. You either go live your own life or you deal with the crap. Of course, largely, she's, done her own thing. With Dad, he had a better plan. After all the abuse and da-da-da-da-da, I said to Dad, you can call me anytime you're willing to talk and dialogue, but I am not going to go down this path. This is the formula that actually could work. So every 5 to 10 years, we'd have 10 minutes of good topics, and he'd start to go down the road, and I'd say, Dad, we're going down that road. Shall we say goodbye? And we'd say goodbye. As he was getting ready to die, I went into great depth into some of the areas of abuse. This is not just for me. It's 5 children that are dealing with the ramifications of this. And I think you have to face things on one level or another as you die or move on in some capacity. I don't pretend to know what goes on, but I definitely believe that there is consciousness outside of the physical body because I've experienced that. So whatever is going on for Dad, the general consensus of ancient cultures is that you have to face who you are and what you've done as part of your dying process. And I thought it might help to lay out everything I saw and understood from that whole process. So I did. And he died saying, thank you for your letter. No apology, no acknowledgement, no direct response. But he said, I have always loved you unconditionally, which is a rather crazy-making thing to say for someone who's physically, emotionally, and mentally abused you repeatedly and played a big part in causing PTSD to such an extent that I've had regular waves of wanting to die. It would be nice to have a little bit of that acknowledged. But insanity, the defense, has always been part of his own need, his own self-centered need to protect himself from the feelings of his impact. And so, why not call all that unconditional love and just avoid it? There is no unconditional human love. I don't care who you are. You have never loved everything and everyone for all time. Because you can't say, I love you unconditionally, on condition that you're you, on condition that I'm having this feeling at this moment of time, which comes and goes. That's condition on time, that's condition on the individual, that's conditional of circumstance, and it comes and goes. That's not unconditional love. That's normal human love, where love always fluctuates, comes and goes, isn't for everyone, and certainly doesn't extend to eternity. And so there's just, so anyway, this is kind of crazy making stuff for people that don't want to deal with their abuse and their impact. It is sad. It's sad. There's a loneliness and realizing that you're not dealing with a person capable of understanding what you feel or why you feel that way, or that it's having an impact and all that time. It's sad. It's very sad. And in this culture, see, that's where I get back. I don't go into a big blame thing with my parents. They were born, both of them, in an American culture. And from what I know of their upbringing, they experienced more abuse than I did in their households. Number one. Number two, Not a single person intervened in their life trajectory to heal the trauma and PTSD that they dealt with. So, nor did anyone say, you shouldn't have kids. They all just did what Americans do. My mom was a beauty, so they all said, oh, you're so beautiful, your kids will be so beautiful. Focus on the body, ignore the heart and the mind. They all said to my dad, oh, you're so smart, da-da-da-da-da, you're brilliant, look at all that. Focus on the mind. And let's ignore the child's emotional and abusive experience. Let's turn a blind eye. That's what this culture is great at, so great. And I think all the women who overeat, all the women who hate their body, all the addicts, all the people, with depression, all the people manically and frantically keeping busy to avoid the depression, they're all dealing with this same essential wound, that their feelings don't matter. And it's sick, it's not personal, it's cultural, stuff has to be done. So how do we rebel? How do we go AWOL on a sick culture that will destroy itself left to its own devices? Well, first of all, breaking rules. So here we get back into the beginning of the video. I'm not supposed to be having a nap. I'm not supposed to be comfortable. I'm not supposed to look like I normally look. I'm supposed to put on a special social face. When you're fucking depressed, you don't give a shit about all these cultural norms, which is the remedy to a culture that is so sick that it will care more about your physical appearance than what you're thinking and feeling. That's a chauvinistic culture. That is an unbalanced culture. It needs medicine. What kind of medicine? How about talking about thoughts and feelings candidly without censorship and not kowtowing and bowing to the physical obsession? How about having your hair messed up? How about going shopping in your pajamas? If you're depressed, it takes energy to change clothes. Why? For these people who could give a shit about your feelings? Why give a shit about their outraged looks that you actually walk into a store fully clothed in more comfortable clothes? So I'll just touch briefly on the psychology of this. One of the sources of depressions is thousands of invisible rules that set you up to be exhausted and invisible. One of the bases of depression is thousands of unspoken rules that set you up to be both exhausted and invisible. So what's the disease? Invisibility and exhaustion, and a lack of transparency. How do you heal those diseases? Well, there's thousands of ways of doing it once you just throw the culture out the window for a little bit. But let's take going shopping in your pajamas, or going to a social event in your pajamas, or greeting someone in your pajamas. Number one, the rule becomes more conscious because people do get a little scandalized by something like that. And so they actually have to talk the unspoken rule, which is refreshing. You can't walk around in your pajamas. Why not? Because it's not how things are done. Why not? Because, well, I like comfortable clothes. I like saving energy. Aren't we the efficient capital of the world? Don't we produce more GDP per person than anyone else in the world? And aren't we proud of that, us Americans? I saved 10 minutes of time. That's how productive I am by going shopping in my pajamas. 10 minutes. How much did you save putting on those very tight jeans that took 20 minutes? How much time did you save? So you've wasted time. You've ruined the culture. You've ruined the culture and the country by spending 20 minutes putting on those tight jeans, which is not efficient. You should have produced more stuff today. So you kind of just play around with this absurdity. Well, you can't walk around. Well, my pajamas cover more of my body than my clothes. Well, you have separate clothes for this. Well, I like being comfortable. So not only have I saved more time, I'm more comfortable than you. Seems awfully intelligent to me. So this, of course, upsets people, but it plays with the same part of the brain. That is, you can't talk about your feelings. You can't advocate for who you are. You just can't. Because you can't, because you can't. That is depressing. What about you can, because you can, because you can? And I'm not talking about hurting people. No. I'm talking about breaking the rules in fun and easy ways where it feels great to break the rules. So, shop in your pajamas. Just doing that may be enough so that you're not depressed. 1, you may get anxious and then you're not depressed. 2, you may find it funny and then you're not depressed. It heals invisibility because everyone's looking at you, and that's one of the wounds when everyone's turning away. Oh, they're depressed. I don't want to look at them. Walk in your pajamas, everyone wants to look at you. Same with your hair sticking up. Go as a woman. I think one of the most liberating things you can possibly do is wander around in your pajamas with your bed hair and no makeup and enjoy yourself. It's wonderful. I'd pick you out of a herd of 100 and engage you immediately because I know I'm dealing with someone who's on a path of liberation and that good things come from that path. And that questionable things come from conformity in a culture that's this sick. So, show some intelligence. So, show some, don't, whatever you do, spend vast amount of energies conforming so that you can have meetings and do things you don't want to do. I do the same in my business. If I'm feeling irritable or tired, I have chronic fatigue sometimes. I open the door in my pajamas and I want someone who's intelligent enough to discern what is truly threatening from what is simply breaking an unspoken and unconscious and somewhat questionable social norm. So this is great. And of course you want to do it consciously. I have enough money and stuff that I'm not depending on any of these people to ruin things, which is, one of the tyrannies is if you're heavily in debt and all that, it's a lot harder to do intelligent things that upset other people. That's one of the reasons I've made a point of having enough money, specifically so that I can do what I want without worrying about money. I fire a client every now and again because I don't want to have to be the person that client wants or is evoking. It's like, well, I'm not enjoying myself that much more. What's it going to take to just tear up our contract amicably? Oh, okay, that's what it takes. Great, here you go. Good luck, and see you later. It's wonderful. And so that's, I think, a key area, number one. Number two, as part of that, I was getting hit really hard this morning with this chronic waves of depression. And, it's like, oh, my back aches, not with physical exertion or anything, but with this kind of just mind-numbing, just it's kind of this chemical wave of, oh gosh, I don't want to be here, I don't want to feel, I don't want to move, I want to be anywhere but here. So this is actually a possible pivot point into comedy. So here's what I did. First of all, I increased my sugar uptake because that is a pleasure drug. So drugs basically give a little bit of boost of pleasure. Sugar is a drug. It's a toxin, it's a drug, but it does give some short-term relief. So I let myself have a virgin pina colada. I also ordered some really delicious food. I was eating that. I also watched some comedy. I love Monty Python, so that gets into... let's see, who's that guy? Norm Macdonald has a great stand-up thing that I find hilarious. And I'll tell you a couple of my favorite comedians. It's kind of a shame that most comedy is less funny today than it was, but Jim Carrey and Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Dumb and Dumber, then those are kind of the movies that come to mind. And then Eddie Izzard can be quite funny, British comedian. YouTube has a lot of this. Then there's Monty Python, funniest of all times. Fawlty Towers, a John Cleese thing, very, very funny. Because you'll get right into that depression. If you watch Fawlty Towers, it's going to touch on all of these, basically, stuck-up cultures like British culture and to some degree American culture are very good at inflicting grievous irritation while simultaneously being haughty and uppity as if they're in the right, which is, of course, a disgusting thing. So Basil Fawlty does a great job of combating that with his excessiveness. And basically, if you just imagine Basil Fawlty and his absurd antics in response to his intense anxieties, depressions, and all that, if you were willing to be Basil Fawlty and shout and scream and rant and rush around and wave your arms and make little caricature faces, you'd probably not be depressed. Of course, you'd probably be irritable and thrown out of whatever club you're in, which is probably quite refreshing in and of itself. That's a great way out. But there's the two Ronnies. There's Beyond the Fringe, but Mike and Dud, Mike Milligan and Dudley Moore. Is it Spike Milligan? Anyway, look for Dudley Moore. The Arthur movies with Lisa Minnelli. And there have been, Groundhog Day. Wonderful. Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. It's actually the movie I've watched more than any other time. I actually watched Groundhog Day 3 times in a row the first day that I saw it. I think I was mildly depressed, and it was just so enjoyable to just replay. And my favorite thing of late is, now keep in mind cultural context is really important. I'm in Thailand at the moment, and it's way more fun in Thailand, frankly. So that's get to Thailand. So I turn on my sad light. That's one thing. I write. That's another thing. I make up videos like this. Whatever is most taboo, basically, to say, I go and say it. 3, I start moving my body. So I was in the pizza restaurant today, and I thought, I cannot take this pain and depression another minute. I have got to do something other than wait for this pizza to arrive. So I get up and pace. I try to figure out what I can do. I know I need to move my body. So I asked my partner, a complete wet blanket, can you jump? How high can you jump? She says, I don't want to jump. So I jump. and she's a wet blanket, which is irritating. So I go to the waitresses. I say, how high can you jump? And we do marks on the edge of the table. And so, I'm completely desperate at this point for some diversion that is constructive, and in this case, moving my body. So being willing to make a complete fool of oneself, which in and of itself, if it stirs some anxiety, that's not depression. That's good. So anyway, so we practiced jumping. No one speaks English in Thailand hardly, so the first waitress didn't understand, but I still demonstrated my jumping prowess. And I pay attention to impact, because the best way to break rules is when everyone says you shouldn't do it, but everyone is happier that you did. And this happens, by the way, when I go shopping in my pajamas. I notice little smiles. I notice little. What's that? Are those pajamas? Sometimes people will approach me. What's with the pajamas? I'll say, well, they're comfortable and fun. How about you? You ever shop in your pajamas? I was like, no. And they go away bemused and thinking. So thinking is good, particularly in a monotonous culture. So I do pay attention to body language. And there's some of this, like this jumping, I wouldn't be doing in a U.S. restaurant because Americans just can't take it. But the Thais have a great sense of humor. And so I jump. And of course, she has no idea what I'm doing and walks away, but I notice a slight lift in her step. So the other waitress comes over, who speaks a little bit more English, and I get her to jump. And she does a jump, and I say, great, bravo. So cheering someone on, appreciating them is great. Sometimes what I'll do is a pity party. And this is where you exaggerate all of your woes. And this is great if you're with someone when you're depressed. So basically, this is what I do. If they're depressed and miserable, I tell them, tell me your woes. And woe is a great word, isn't it? Woeful, woe. I mean, it kind of dramatizes things. So I say, tell me your woes. And maybe she says, well, there was this guy in the parking lot. I was just about to take my space, and then he ran in there. And I say, that's dreadful. That fucking bastard stealing parking lot places from little old ladies. That's outrageous. And what next? And she'll say, well, I was thinking I look a little bit old, and this and that. And I'd say, that's outrageous. Here you are, a beautiful woman in the prime of life, and you're stuck in this fucked up culture that's going to criticize the slightest wrinkle. How dare they? What a wretched state. Poor you. It's terrible. She says, I know, it's terrible. And I say, absolutely outrageous. And what else? What else? Well, I was shopping, and I interrupt. I say, I'll bet I know what's coming. Someone with a huge cart went in front of you. It's like, yes, that's right. And I say, that is disgusting. These fucking people with huge carts, they're just waiting in the rings. And as soon as you, a wonderful young lady, walks into the room, they all gang up and get ready. I mean, if I was there, I'd shoot every one of them. And this is called a pity party, and it's wonderful. Do it for about 20 minutes, and if you're not in hysterics, heaven help you. So exaggerate, commiserate, empathize, validate, and get animated, get physically animated. So that's the pity party. It's wonderful. What's disgusting is how many people won't do a pity party. Oh, no, it's not that bad. In other words, they hide their depression so that it can't be healed. fuck it. Have a pity party. If it lifts 20%, 10%, if it lifts it for an hour, 2 hours, oh, I'm too depressed. Well, that's outrageous. Here you are, depressed. What else? So enjoy it. I do the same thing myself. Those fucking bastards. First they do this, then they do this, then they do this. Then I try and make a YouTube video to talk about how insane it is, and the fucking assholes just sit and judge me. Oh, he shouldn't have done that. Oh, he's so fat. Oh, he's fucking assholes. And then I try and do this, and my assistant, and then I've got a slow internet connection on the fucking hotel, and suddenly, as soon as I put it in, it goes down from X kilobytes per second down to this, and I have to wait 16 hours for the video to upload. And then my assistant makes a mistake and puts the wrong title in it. And if you've got someone who's intelligent, who's enjoying the pity party, you can really have a great time. And again, what you're healing is invisibility, because every bit of this, from pajamas to pity party to all, you're becoming visible. You're healing chauvinism because it's all about feelings. And you're healing this sinking exhaustion of doing all this stuff to please other people. See, like, I have more energy after doing all this because I've broken about 100 social rules, from dress to posture to appearance to length. I'm supposed to get all of my fucking woes into a cute 5-minute YouTube video. Fuck that. Let's take up everyone's whole afternoon. So there's endless amounts of pressure coming in. It's like, oh, that's gone a bit too far. Fuck that. So this is the way out of depression. Now, I'm not saying you should get out of depression. You can stay in there. I can stay in there. I'm just saying, how? How do you know? I'm 50% less depressed. So we have jumping. Then we have anecdotal tales. Yesterday, I gave a waitress an ice cube for a present. She gave me a nice glass of ice. I had told the waitress I don't want so much ice, so I thought I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I reached in, I took out an ice cube. I said, I have a present for you. She's like, a present? I said, yes. I said, put out your hand. She put it out. I put the ice cube in her hand. I said, here, a present for you. And she went off, mulling over what to do with such strange customers. Coming back to the hotel, I'm carrying my snorkeling gear. And swimming, by the way, is great for depression in warm ocean water, if at all possible. So I'm coming back from snorkeling, and one of the lovely gardeners who I enjoy talking with. So that's another thing. So you have people you like that are nice. I pick out the house cleaners at my hotel, and I say, I want you to clean my room in particular. Because it's fun. Flirting is great fun. You can explain the thing to your partner. Flirting is good for my depression. I don't want to be depressed. This is not anything reflecting on you, but I'm going to flirt. Now, that can be, whatever you work out with your partner. They can enjoy it. They can be outraged, whatever. But flirting is a great upper. I mean, it's prime depression medicine. Then there's as I say, these little offhand things. Being childlike, again, very undignified, very taboo. So when the waitress when the gardener that I like asked what's in my bag, I said a lion. And she didn't quite understand me being Thai, which is even better, because then miming is much more fun than saying things. So I roared like a lion. I said, ah, ah! I said, a lion is in there. And she realized I was joking. And I said, it's a baby because I cannot eat a big lion because I am too fat. By the way, people think I'm drunk when I talk like this. Depression probably has that effect. It's a chemical thing. I actually don't drink alcohol. But, it's when you're in this desperate place, you need relief. And you need to find it somewhere sane, something healthy. And these are joyful things because the beauty of this is, again, I watch the impact, and they're tittering to each other, the gardeners, for 5 minutes after the lion incident. Their energy picks up. And see, this is what's so sick about our culture. Almost anything that would bring great humor, surprise, levity, and lift the energy is strictly off limit. That's immature. But I look at it, and of course I have an inner child, an adolescent that loves all these playful things, and that's the part of me that is not depressed. So that's the part that I want to grow. It's just common sense. But also, I've written books on psychology, and I look at the situation, and I say, I cannot think of a single thing that is as smart as this. I could give a psychology workshop at a university, and I could not get as much happiness in that lecture as I'm getting by pretending to be a lion to these gardeners. And if psychology is about creating and healing the well-being of the psyche, then it's a complete dismal failure to have 50 tired and bored people listening in lecture format when you could be roaring like a lion. And I said the sickest part of our culture is that the very things like roaring like a lion is free, doesn't hurt the environment, doesn't take any time, and is completely fun. We can't have that. Why don't you have a therapy session that doesn't bring as much fun for $300, drive in traffic, hurt the environment, and sit there being serious talking about painful things? Now, I'm not knocking all therapy, but after over $100,000 in therapy and noticing that various things are worse than when I began, it's about time to call a shit-faced system what it is. This is not terribly effective. It's effective for you that you have your $100,000, and this is actually one of my gripes to my main therapist. I've gone through a number of them. My main therapist, I complained bitterly to about all this. What a crackpot it was that when I was going through one of my big traumas recently, when I was betrayed and set up and sexually abused by another therapist, this fucking asshole just sat there and said, gee, I don't want to get into it. People can be really mean and aggressive if, and I don't want to be in the middle of it. It's like, you're my fucking therapist. I'm being abused by another therapist, and you won't even open your mouth to confront them? Back me up. Like, oh, I wouldn't want to deal with that. No, you'd just like to take my fucking $100,000 to sit there and listen and do nothing while I deteriorate. That's what you'd fucking well like. Get off your fucking ass, you son of a bitch. And I think a little provoking is sometimes in order with these therapists, if they're that callous that they can manage that. I don't think I could pull that off, I'd be out skipping rope with my clients if they were depressed. I'd want to organize life around that. I don't even think it's terribly kind and effective to run therapy like a business. I think it should be people that want to help in the way that works with measurable results, not just year after year it seems to be same old, same old. So anyway, that is the gamut. That's the system. That's the thoughts, the stuff. that can at least take 50% off. The other stuff is some of it's cyclical, and then there's lots of great material and stuff that can be looked at. Positive psychology books on Audible. I hate reading when I'm depressed, so I listen to audiobooks. I've listened to more than 500 audiobooks in the last 5 years. 100 books a year, why not? It's also important to know you can do stuff and get stuff done. I can get plenty of stuff done when I'm depressed. It's just not very fun. So what I do is I do the stuff to keep life in order. I also reduce weight, meaning I've hired a house cleaner that comes 1 hour every single day to take the whole house off my plate. It's great. I'm a bachelor, and so one of the troubles is isolation. Dogs are very good. I highly recommend dogs and possibly cats. I travel too much for a dog myself, but I really wish I could have a dog. The housekeeper, I pick people with up energy that are totally comfortable with not only me in my pajamas, but talking about deep stuff. That often is an uplift. And I specifically do it for that point. It's 50% for the physical stuff, 50% as a catch, as kind of a safety net, so that throughout the week, if I say, I'd really like to have a nice chat with a kind, it's usually a woman. Most men aren't comfortable in the United States. That's statistical. I'd pick a man in another culture anytime. In the U.S., it's a bit iffy. But I've tried it a few times, and so I have a nice uplift there, and sometimes, so that's great. Hugs, 7-second hugs, release oxytocin, absolutely fabulous. And then the other thing, and then just taking chores off my plate is great. MDMA in a therapeutic system setting has been very powerful. And I'm looking into other psychedelics. I'm looking into the legalities and stuff of it. Maybe going to Peru for some ayahuasca. I'll look into that. That's kind of looming. I'm doing research on that. Terence McKenna, I think, going to outlandish thinkers. Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, they're filled on YouTube. Great remedies for an altered view of reality. Rupert Sheldrake. I love Rupert Sheldrake. Wonderful. Again, breaking the whole snobbery around science. And so hope that takes you into some nice domains. And that's all for now.